Behind him came another orc, then another and another and another, until there was a flood of them, all racing to pass through the portal as fast as their feet would carry them. And not just orcs. Gretar saw several ogres emerge, and a group of smaller, slighter figures with heavy hooded cloaks bridged the gap as well. One warrior caught Gretar's attention, too tall and bulky to be a full orc, his features brutish enough to have some ogre blood in him. This one did not run with the air of panic the others did, but with purpose, as if he was running to something rather than from it. At his heels loped a massive jet-black wolf. An orc shoved past this warrior as they stepped from the portal, snarling at the obstruction. "Out of the way, half-breed," the orc snapped, but the warrior merely shook his head, refusing to be baited at such a time. The wolf, however, snarled at the orc before the warrior silenced it with a sharp hand gesture. The wolf fell silent, utterly obedient, and the warrior dropped a huge hand on the black head with affection. "What has happened here?" Ner'zhul demanded loudly. "You." The shaman pointed toward one of the unfamiliar creatures. "What manner of orc are you? Why cover your face so? Come here." The figure paused, then suddenly shrugged and stepped closer to Ner'zhul. "As you wish," he said in a cold voice that had a slightly mocking tone to it. Despite the heat of the land's baked, lifeless soil, Gretar shivered. A mailed hand slid the hook back, and Gretar could not help crying out in horror. Perhaps the being's features had once been fine and regular, but no longer. The skin was a pale grayish green, and had burst open at the juncture where ear met jaw. A thin trickle of ooze glimmered. Swollen, cracked purple lips drew back in a smile as the eyes glowed with malevolent humor and a fierce intelligence. The thing was obviously dead. Even Ner'zhul shrank back, though he rallied quickly. What are you?" Ner'zhul demanded, in a voice that shook only a little. "And what do you want here?" "Don't you recognize me? I am Teron Gorefiend," the figure replied, chuckling at the shaman's obvious discomfiture. "Impossible. He is dead and gone, slaughtered by Doomhammer along with the rest of the Shadow Council." "Dead I am indeed," the creature agreed, "but not gone. Your old apprentice, Gul'dan, found a way to bring us back, and into these rotting carcasses." He shrugged, and Gretar could hear the lifeless flesh creak in slight protest. "It suffices." "Gul'dan?" The old shaman seemed more shocked by the revelation than by the sight of the walking corpse in front of him. "Your master still lives? Then you should return to him. You forsook me and shaman tradition to follow his lead and become a warlock when you lived. Abomination. Serve him now that you are dead." But Gorefiend was shaking his head. "Gul'dan is dead, and good riddance. He betrayed us, having the horde at a crucial moment and forcing Doomhammer to pursue him instead of conquering a human city. The treachery cost us the war." "We have lost?" Ner'zhul stammered, "but how is that possible?" "The horde covered the very plains, and Doomhammer would not go down without a fight." "Oh, he fought," Gorefiend agreed, "yet all his might was not enough. He killed the humans' leader, but was overpowered in turn." Ner'zhul seemed stunned, turning to look at the panting, bloodied orcs and ogres who had rushed through the gates moments earlier. He took a deep breath and straightened, turning to the ogre who had accompanied him. "Dentarg, summon the other chieftains. Tell them to gather here at once, bringing only weapons and armor." The wave washed out of the portal with no warning. A massive energy burst that slammed all of them to the ground. Gretar gasped for breath, the wind knocked out of him. He stumbled to his feet only to be greeted by a second explosion, more violent than the first. This time, hunks of stone had been snatched up by the energy that powered the portal and came flying past them, chips and slabs and slivers and sheets. The curtains wavered, becoming opaque. No, Ner'zhul raced toward the portal. He was still several feet away when the shimmering curtain of light flickered, contracted, froze, and then exploded. Stones and dust erupted from the archway. Ner'zhul was tossed into the air like an old bone and struck the earth hard. Dentarg let out an angry bellow and rushed to his master's side, scooping him up as if he weighed nothing. The old shaman lay limp, head lolling, eyes shut, a trickle of blood along his right side. For a wild moment, energy screamed and shrieked all about them, howling like angry spirits. Then as abruptly as they had come, the lights vanished, the curtain disappearing utterly, leaving only an empty stone portal behind. The dark portal had been severed. Grittar stared at the stone archway and at all the horde warriors who had escaped back through it one last time. Then he glanced over at Dentarg and the elderly shaman cradled in the ogre's surprisingly gentle grasp. In the name of the ancestors, what would they do now? That is the end of the prologue. Okay, on to the actual chapter 1. Ner'zhul, Gorefiend and Gaz Soul Ripper strode into the village as if they owned it, booted feet moving swiftly over hard-packed dirt. Curious villagers poked their heads out of the doors and windows of their simple huts, only to shrink back inside as the interlopers fixed them with a baleful stare from unnaturally glowing eyes. Ner'zhul, Gorefiend called again in a voice that was both cold and commanding. I would speak with you. Don't know who you are, a voice growled behind him, and don't much care. You're trespassing on Shadow Moon territory. Leave or die. I need to speak with Ner'zhul, the Death Knight replied, turning to face the powerful orc warrior who had stepped threateningly behind him. Tell him Teron Gorefiend is here. The orc looked unsettled at the name. Gorefiend? You are the Death Knight? He grimaced, showing his tusks, glancing at Gorefiend and his companion, then obviously mustering his courage. You don't look so dangerous. Dangerous enough, replied Soul Ripper. He turned and nodded at something the orc could not see. Several more beings, their faces hooded with their glowing eyes visible, emerged from the very shadows of the village's huts and stepped up beside their two fellow Death Knights. Gorefiend chuckled, and the orc swallowed. Now fetch your master, lest your arrogance bring you swift death instead. Ner'zhul sees no one, the orc stated. He was beginning to sweat, but he obviously had his orders. Gorefiend sighed, a strange whistling sound as air was taken into and then expelled from dead lungs. Swift death then, he said. Before the orc could even form a reply, Gorefiend extended a mailed hand and murmured something. The warrior gasped, doubling over and then dropping to his knees. Gorefiend tightened his fists and blood suddenly burst from the hapless orc's nose, eyes, and mouth. Gorefiend had already turned away by this point, having lost interest in tormenting the annoyance. Dark magic, one of the Shadow Moon warriors shouted, grabbing up the axe beside him. Kill the warlocks before they can afflict any more of us, he bellowed, and his fellows responded by readying themselves as well. Gorefiend whirled, glowing eyes narrowing. If you all die, so be it. I will speak with Ner'zhul. This time he extended both hands, and darkness formed at his fingertips. It exploded like a glowing black flame, knocking back the orc who hurled the axe as well as his fellows. They lay where the blast had blown them, screaming in agony. Stop. There has been enough killing already. The old orc's voice rang with authority. Gorefiend lowered his arms, and his companions fell back, watching their leader. There you are, Ner'zhul, Gorefiend drawled. I thought that might get your attention. He turned to regard Ner'zhul, mildly surprised to notice the old orc's face had been painted white, almost like a skull. Gorefiend mused. As their eyes met, Ner'zhul's widened. I have dreamed of you, he murmured. I have had visions of death, and now you are here. Long green fingers reached to touch the skull painted on his face. Small bits of white flaked off at the gesture. 2 years I've been dreaming of this. You have come for me then, for all of us. You will have to take my soul. Not at all, I have come to save it. But you are partially right. I have come for you, but not the way you think. I wish to see you lead. Ner'zhul looked confused. Lead? Why? So that I can destroy more of the horde? Haven't I done enough? The old shaman's eyes were haunted. Nay, I am done with such things. I led our people once, straight into Gul'dan's plots, straight into schemes that have doomed this world and a battle that nearly destroyed us. Seek a leader elsewhere. Gorefiend frowned. This was not going as expected, and he couldn't simply say, slay Ner'zhul as he had the shaman's clansmen. He tried again. The horde needs you. The horde is dead, Ner'zhul snapped. Half our people are gone, trapped on that horrible world and lost to us forever. You want me to lead that? They are not lost forever, Gorefiend replied, and the calm certainty in his tone brought Ner'zhul up short. The portal was destroyed, but may yet be restored. That got Ner'zhul's attention. What? How? A small rift remains on Azeroth, Gorefiend explained, and this side is intact. I helped create the dark portal, and I can still sense it. I can help you widen the rift until the horde can pass through it. The shaman seemed to consider this for an instant, then shook his head, folding in on himself almost visibly. What good would that do us? The Alliance is too great a foe. The horde will never win. Our people are as good as dead already. All we have left now is the manner of that death. Again, his fingers touched the painted image on his face, almost of their own volition. His weakness disgusted Gorefiend. It was hard to believe that this wreck, obsessed with death, his own and that of others, had once been so, and unfortunately still so necessary. Death is not the only option, not if we rebuild and use the portal. Gorefiend countered, forcing patience. We don't have to win. We don't even need to battle the Alliance again. I have quite another plan for the horde. If I can get a hold of certain artifacts, there are things I learned about from Gul'dan that... Gul'dan and his twisted schemes, they reach out and destroy lives even from beyond the grave. He scowled at Gorefiend. You and your plans. And how much power would you gain from success? Power is all you Shadow Council bastards care about. Gorefiend's patience, never great, had evaporated. He seized the old shaman's arms and shook him angrily. 2 years since the portal collapsed, and you have been hiding in your village while the clans slaughter each other. All they need is guidance, and then they will be powerful again. Between your supporters and my Death Knights, we can force the clans to obey you. With Doomhammer dead or imprisoned on Azeroth, you are the only one left who can lead them. I have been examining the portal, assessing the damage, and I told you I have a solution. I've assigned several Death Knights to the site already. Even as I speak to you, they are working spells, preparing it for its reopening. I'm sure it can succeed. And what is this solution? Ner'zhul spat bitterly. Did you discover a way for us to return to Azeroth and win the war we lost 2 years ago? I think not. We're doomed. We will never win. He turned away and took a step back toward his hut. Never mind the war. Listen to me, old man, the Death Knight shouted at him. We do not need to defeat the Alliance because we do not need to conquer Azeroth. Ner'zhul paused and glanced back. But you said you could reopen the portal. Why do that if not to return there? Return, yes, but not for battle. Gorefiend closed the gap between them again. We need only to find and claim certain magical artifacts. Once we have those, we can leave Azeroth and never return. And stay here? Ner'zhul waved a hand, the gesture encompassing much of the stricken landscape around them. You know as well as I do that Draenor is dying. Soon it will not be able to sustain even those of us left. He had not remembered the shaman as being so slow-witted. It will not have to, Gorefiend assured him, speaking slowly as if to a child. With these artifacts in hand, we can leave both Azeroth and Draenor behind and go somewhere else, someplace better. Now he had Ner'zhul's full attention. Something like hope flickered across the white painted face. For a long moment, Ner'zhul stood poised, either to re-enter his hut and resume his self-pitying seclusion, or to embrace this new possibility. You have a plan for this? The old shaman asked finally. I do. Another long pause. Gorefiend waited. I will listen. Ner'zhul turned and stepped back into his hut. But this time, Teron Gorefiend, Warlock and Death Knight, came with him.